What would change in the world if you, me, and everyone choose to feed the wolf of possibilities instead of the one of doubt, distrust, and despair? The way I see it, our point of view creates reality, not the other way around. Somewhere deep within, I think we know that. In this podcast, I am daring you to claim this remarkable superpower. Join us and be inspired by trackers, explorers, and finders of possibilities from the multiverse of hope. Welcome to the podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities, with your host, Katarina Wallentin. Welcome to this episode of the Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities podcast. And my guest today is Suzy Godsey. Suzy is the program director of Talk to the Animals, a body and tech wizard and an access consciousness facilitator. Her ability to listen to and learn from animals has given her a truly unique capacity to facilitate others and show them how animals see the world. Your way of being with animals always truly amazed me. I used to have like a slight fear of all animals. It's getting better. And so you were like this brave tiger tamer when I met you. And I know that in many ways, you actually enjoy hanging out with animals more than with people. So how did you discover that you could hear animals and talk to them?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Katarina, for having me. And what a great program you have started here. And I just really enjoy that, first of all. And I really knew as a kid that I had something going on with animals, but I didn't have words for it. I couldn't explain it. And the weird thing was I took animal communication classes and I literally failed all of them. And so in a way, I doubted my abilities for a very long time, really until I came to Access, where I met Gary Douglas, and he shook my hand and said, "So when are you starting to teach classes about animals?" And I literally looked over my shoulder because I was sure he was talking to someone standing behind me. And I didn't understand what he was talking about because I literally had failed every attempt to do this in a proper way. But what I didn't know at the time was that there are so many ways to perceive energy. And I was just perceiving energy in a different way than everyone else was. And so that's what made it wrong to me, because I wasn't following the practice that everyone was having. And I find that so often too now. Now I do finally actually facilitate people and have classes and everything. And I find that so often when I tell this story that people go, "Oh, that's what happens to me. I don't get it this way. I'm not a normal communicator of animals like the way that it's being described and where, all this stuff." And so I'm like, oh, it's really important that you recognize that you actually have the ability, and all of us do, and that's really the fun part.
So what do they tell you?
Well, they tell you that all animals communicate in pictures. And, and so you do a meditation and then you follow basically whatever they do, which, every animal communicator has their own way of teaching you. But a lot of times it's basically going into a kind of meditation and then following that meditation, and then getting to a place where you then ask a question, you ask permission to ask a question, then you ask a question, and then you're waiting for these pictures. Well, what occurred for me was whenever the question was asked, which was also often asked before the meditation started, I already had an awareness. And so by the time I went into this meditation and I went down a tree through the roots and started walking across a meadow and sitting by a river and looking at the meadow, I already had the awareness 5 minutes ago. So now when the question came again, it was like nothing. I was just sitting there going, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. I am completely clueless. And, and then when people started talking about their experiences afterwards and all these wonderful pictures and stories that they were getting, funny thing for me was a lot of it was like, oh yeah, I knew that. Oh yeah, I knew that. But I had no pictures and nothing. And so I thought I was just wrong. And I totally disregarded my thoughts that were saying, yeah, I knew that. Oh yeah, I knew that. That I ignored, I just thought, well, I didn't get it the proper way, so I must have been cheating, or it didn't even occur to me that I got it.
It's funny. It reminds me of this, when a kid knows the answer to a math test and they just know the answer, but then they have to go backwards and prove like how they got to the answer. And otherwise they don't get the points, for the test, because they can't, even though they know the answer, they just see the equation and know it, but you have to walk that whole way. So it's like, for you, it's an instant energetic awareness of what's going on.
Yeah, and for many people, it is that way in truth. And yes, some people get pictures very dynamically, but that also is usually instantly there. And, energy talks to us. Yeah, my God, it's faster than thoughts, that's for sure. And I think that's also why we sometimes disregard it, because it is so quick. And, and even how often have you had a situation where you were sitting with someone and you hear them talking and you know what they're going to say?
Always.
A
lot. Yeah.
Yeah, because the energy is ahead of the speak. Yeah. The energy is there and it's simultaneous too. So you get this whole download in a split second, and then the person starts talking. And, and it's a similar thing with the animal communication. You get this whole download, and then comes maybe the pictures and the other stuff, but it's like the download is there regardless whether you get pictures or not.
And it's funny too, because with a person, I sometimes have that, I'm aware what they're going to say, and then they don't say it. They say something different because they're not totally congruent with what they really want to say. So they try to put it some other way, which will better serve whatever purpose they have. Well, animals, I guess, do not do that because they don't really have those agendas going that we do.
Exactly. They don't lie. I mean, they don't lie to themselves. Let's just say that, because an animal can also quote unquote lie if they want to hold back on something, like if they've had some unpleasant experiences with people and they don't wish to really be forward. They might be withholding information, but they don't flat out lie, and people do that mostly to themselves. And that's the interesting part too. There's so many people that would say, I'm honest. Yes, they're honest, trying to be honest with other people, but at the same time lying to themselves, which, yeah, and that's when that energetic communication is not congruent with what comes out of their mouth, which is also confusing to most people.
Very, which may be why you like hanging out with animals more.
Yeah, I would say probably. I still, Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, as you all know, he always says, don't believe what people say. Always listen to the energy. And oh God, I still am working on this one, because I still want to trust the words that are coming out of people's mouths.
And so talking about Gary, because one of the things that he says is that everything I ever learned, I learned from my horse. And I know you also spend a lot of time with horses, and you even live now on a ranch where there are a lot of horses. So can you talk about that? What does he mean? And what can you learn from your horse that we haven't even acknowledged?
Yeah. Oh my. That's a lot. So, what does he mean by that? Well, for a long time, I wasn't sure about that either until I really started facilitating my own classes and with the horses, and then allowing people to interact with horses. And that's where I saw that horses have this. Well, actually, all animals do have this, but with horses, we listen more because they're so big, and it's a little bit of a different relationship than what we have to a dog, because a horse is basically a prey animal. In other words, we are predators. We, as in our construct, we are predators, and horses are prey. And so it's a different relationship. You're asking a prey animal to trust you as a predator, which isn't necessarily a thing that comes natural, right? The fawn isn't running around trusting the wolf. No, the fawn is aware of the wolf and it knows if the wolf is hungry, but it's not going to run around, quote unquote, trusting the wolf, rubbing up against it, saying, hi, I'm here. How are you doing? And so we're asking our horses to do that with us. And, yes, horses have been around us for a long time. And still, my sense is there is just a slightly different relationship that we have with them than to dogs and cats and other animals that are living in our homes. And so when we are with the horses, if we're not being ourselves in that moment, meaning that, like, let's say I'm kind of a person that's not sure and I'm insecure, but on the outside, I try to be really loud and funny and, try to make everyone believe I'm totally confident. Well, the horse doesn't buy the outside. It doesn't buy all that. The horse sees right through it and sees your insecurity. And it will take advantage of that in a sense, not because it wants to take advantage of you, but because it will just respond to that insecurity. So if you're not sure what you want and the horse knows what it wants, like I'm going to walk over there, if you're not clear on, no, you're staying here with me, then the horse will just walk over there and drag you right along. And so this is the fun part to watch, because you can see how people then learn about themselves, like, oh, I'm obviously not being clear here about what I want, or wow, I'm actually quite unsure about all this and I thought I was more sure, or all of these things. And so what Gary means is you can learn a lot about yourself when you're around a horse, because you will be confronted with that in sometimes not such a pleasant way, really.
It's like the horses teach us about being or being us and being congruent with who we be. I remember when I started riding in Costa Rica, and I stepped up on my horse Allegra, and in the beginning he would always be very slow, like really slow. When he would run, he would be in the very back of our group, and it was like literally he really wouldn't go fast at all. And I remember Gary asked one of the guys that we were working with if maybe Katarina needs a different horse, because I was frustrated, in apprentices, because it was so slow. And he said, no, he'll be faster when she's ready. And it took like 2 years nearly. And then he started running in the front of the group continuously all the time. Same horse, same person, but different congruency with my being. And then what started to happen was that he continuously wanted to gallop. And I realized this is because I kind of wanted to gallop, but not really, but kind of, but not really. So he was immediately responding to how willing I was to be clear with what I actually decided or where I actually wanted to go. So that's actually what I learned all the time riding was about me. And if I was congruent with what I desired, what I wanted, and who I was being.
Yeah. And at the same time, also to acknowledge like how much horses do take care of us. He could have galloped the first day and thrown you off, and and that would have been that. But he didn't desire that, and most horses don't wish to harm us or get rid of us, which also a lot of people assume, like, why would a horse trust me, or why would a horse want to be around me? All they want to do is be with their friends and in the stable or whatever, or eating. But that's not true either. They are such caring creatures, and they really do want to take care of us too.
And one of the things that I remember asking you a lot in the first years when we started to ride, because I was so nervous. And one of the things you always said to ask was, will you take care of me today? And I think one time I got a no, and then I didn't go riding that day. And it was really amazing to be willing to actually listen to the answer and really ask, will you take care of me today? And it's an energetic ask and an energetic answer. And it just always after that, created this sense that I have choice and I will follow what I know. So what other questions would you recommend people asking? Like, that's a great one.
I mean, in general, I am always in the question, like, is an animal even interested in me? Because this is another thing too. A lot of people assume that animals will be interested in them because they're used to dogs running up to them and wanting to be pet. And then when an animal doesn't do that, people always go into what's wrong versus really asking, hey, is this animal interested in me? Is this animal interested in people? Because some are not, and some don't wish to be pet all the time, and some don't want to be hugged and all that kind of stuff. But then we assume there's something wrong with either us or that animal. But it's just some animals are more cuddly than others. And Some animals like to hang out with us more than others. And so if we were willing to really also look at the individuals and be willing to ask some questions, especially when there's stuff going on that we're not sure about, go to the question rather than conclusion. A lot of people immediately go, oh, yeah, I got this one from the rescue and it has been abused. That's why it's having these things going on. But often when we start asking questions, it's not that at all. It's something completely different that has this behavior locked in, and not the fact that they were from a rescue or they ended up in a shelter. So I think being in the question is really imperative, because in a way, animals function that way. Animals don't conclude. They don't, well, okay. Let's just say they can also make a decision sometimes that, for example, I don't trust people. That can be a decision an animal makes from an experience, but they don't usually come to a conclusion where they then basically build a whole thing on a conclusion. That's more us. We like to do that, and we like to come to these fixed things that we're then using, rather than being a little bit more space. And I think that's what animals can teach us too, is like, let go, relax, expand out, have some space.
That, and also what you're also pointing to is this: every animal is unique, just like every being and every person that you meet is unique. Instead of thinking this is what you would ask a horse, like I was doing, like you're saying, hey, what horse is it that you're going to go meet or ride on? Like, who is the horse that you're meeting? And then suddenly there's a whole different thing that occurs, a whole different space, because every single animal then are unique in their own right, so to say. And one of the most beautiful stories that that I've heard you tell a few times is how you met your partner Charlie, which is a dog that lives with you. Would you tell the story? Because it's like one of those where the possibilities basically begets possibilities,
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny. I was literally in Turkey, sitting in a hotel room working on my computer, and I wasn't looking at anything dog related. I was working, for stuff for the classes with Access. So I had lots of windows open also on my browser, but nothing about dogs. And all of a sudden this window pops up, literally like a pop-up screen. And it pops up and says, and has a picture of Charlie and says, "Hi, my name is Chipper and I have 3 days to live." And I was a bit perplexed, and so I looked at the picture and I went like, where did this come from? And why did this pop up on my screen in Turkey? I was living at the time in California, and this was a shelter somewhere very far away from where I live. And I thought, well, it was still California, but I still thought, but this is strange. Like, what is going on here? So then I had an immediate connection to this animal, but then I went into conclusion. I was like, oh yeah, well, that's typical me. I better look at other dogs of this website just to kind of, prove my point that yes, I will feel the same way about all of them. And then I could just close the browser window and forget about it. Well, I did that exercise and it didn't work. All the other dogs were like, yeah, it's a dog. And I didn't have that same thing. So I was like, darn. And at the time I didn't have a pet, and I wasn't looking for one either. So I thought, oh, okay, fine. So I went back to his picture and then I posted him and basically on my Facebook page, and I said, hey, look, I can vouch for this dog. He will be the best dog you will ever have. And if you don't, I will give you free sessions for his lifetime. So basically, that was my little thing. Please go and adopt him. He's a great dog. So that was the thing. So then I closed the browser window and I was like, okay, fine. I did what I could and that's it. So then 3 days later, when his expiration date was of that shelter, when he was supposed to be euthanized, I just checked in and I had noticed that his expiration date had been extended by 2 weeks, and nobody had reacted to my post on Facebook, which was interesting too, because I usually have a little bit of interaction with my Facebook stuff, and there was nothing. And I thought, oh, that's weird. So then, in the meantime, I fly home from Turkey, classes are over. And so now he's nagging on me, it's like, it's tickling me. It's pushing me. So, well, a week later, I'm sitting in my car driving for several hours to pick him up. And still with this idea, okay, I'm going to take him out of a shelter and I will find him a new home because it will be easy because he's such a fantastic dog. So I picked him up. He is a fantastic dog. I tried to adopt him out 5 times and people return him with the most ridiculous stories. He was biting their other dog. He was pissing on their furniture. He was doing this and doing that. And I'm like, he hasn't done any of this at my house. So that was the fun part too. Like, so he was definitely letting me know, I am yours and I am coming to you and I'm staying with you. And it took me a year before I finally got that. So he's been with me since then, which has been 10 years now. So
he found you.
He found me, all right.
Yeah, definitely. I would say, so if you were to say something really, like when you've done sessions with people, with animals, what has one of the most surprising things that you've discovered been? Like, where you even kind of thought it would go one way and it just went somewhere completely different.
So yes, there was one story that didn't happen to me personally, but it actually happened to Gary Douglas in one of his classes. There was a horse that was a beautiful horse and would do anything you wanted. And as soon as you put the saddle on the horse, she would only walk backwards. She would not move forward. She just moved backwards. And the people there at the stable had all these ideas to what was wrong and what was going on. And, everybody had a point of view about it. Everyone had some kind of theory to what was happening. And yet Gary just stood there and he looked at the horse and he said, so what's that all about? What's going on with you? And then he got this picture of the horse wanting to do dressage. Now, this horse was a quarter horse. So this is an American cow horse, literally like used in the Western world for, barrel racing, cowboy stuff. You do cowboy stuff on a quarter horse. Definitely do not do dressage on a quarter horse. And a quarter horse is also a bit more stocky. So they're wider, they have a bigger rump and everything. So the dressage horses are usually narrower and they're slender and, they are also like, have a certain elegance in the way that they move their bodies. A quarter horse is way more, I'm here, I'm. So anyway, and so Gary was like, dressage, you want to do dressage? And the horse was like, yes. And so he asked the stable, do you have a dressage saddle that would fit this horse, an English saddle that would fit this horse? And they were like, oh, we have to look because, a bit more girthy and everything. So yes, they found a saddle. And then he said, so is anybody here who knows how to ride English? And there was a lady there and she said, yeah, I do. So he put her on the horse. And not only did the horse go forward, that horse was showing off things that nobody had ever taught it. Nobody even knew this horse knew about. I mean, this horse was doing side passes and prancing and doing everything that a dressage horse would do, or a lot of things that a dressage horse would do that nobody had ever taught that horse. And that was definitely something that nobody expected. And, was literally only because Gary was just, hey, what's up? And he's willing to receive any information. He doesn't have a preconceived idea of what should be right or wrong. He just goes, hey, what's going on? And then here's the information. So that was definitely one of these fun stories that blew everyone totally away.
And it's funny because I was going to ask you, so you have this magical capacities with animals, but you also have it with bodies and you have it with tech equipment, like 3, not totally different areas, but yet quite different areas. So what is it that, can you see like some kind of way that they all go together, bodies and animals and tech equipment?
Well, to me, it's all just energy, and I guess as a kid, yeah, technical things always talked to me just in the same way as an animal would talk to me. And I didn't make that different. Like I didn't put a distinction there. I didn't judge it by saying, well, this can't be, to me, anything is sort of like a living thing in a way. Even a computer, even a television or a chair or a car, to me, they all sort of have a life of their own in a way. And so I guess to me as a kid, that was just normal. Like, yeah, why not? I mean, it's a thing. Why wouldn't it talk to me? Like, I would have expressed it differently as a kid. But now I obviously have other words, other terms for that, since Access, thankfully, Access looks at the world in such a different and refreshing way. And so, yes, in Access, we would say everything has consciousness. And so there is always an energetic communication you can have with everything. And so I guess I was just, in a way, really as a kid, willing to just have all of that. And yeah, and mechanical things and technical things always fascinated me too. I always thought they were fascinating. Like, whoa, look how this works, look how these little sprockets move this around. Or like, I've always was fascinated by that. And so I guess when something wasn't working, it would just kind of tell me what I had to do. And sometimes what I just had to be, because literally my grandma would tell my mom, can you please bring Suzy over because my TV isn't working? And I was 4 years old. And then she would just say to me, the TV isn't working. And I would just walk over there and touch the TV and touch a few buttons and it would work again.
So it's like you're an energetic communicator and it works with all kinds of things. And maybe that's also why, because humans or persons, they have a lot of other stuff going on, while bodies and animals and technical things are much clearer in their energy in that way. So you should give yourself that as a title, energetic communicator.
With all things.
With all things. Yeah.
Not with people so much. Yeah, right.
Not people in apprentices. That would be beautiful. I love that title for you. And finally, I know that your target with your work is really to change the world. And how do you see then the world changing if people would be willing to start, I guess, energetically communicate with all things?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if that was the case, I think everybody would see where we're being unkind at the moment to the animals around us and where we could change that. And this doesn't mean that we all have to become vegetarians. And this is, a big topic in the world. Oftentimes, like if we are kind to animals means we can slaughter them. Well, the interesting part is that some animals are quite willing to be eaten. And that's not just for us, that's also out there in nature. And, and like I said, it's a can of worms. We don't have to open that right now. It's more just the recognition that this doesn't mean that the world has to look a certain way, but could it be like if we no longer would see certain things as necessary that are unnecessary? For example, when I look at animal testing, that to me is a completely unnecessary thing. And it's even been said by science many times now that it doesn't work, number one. Number two, it's completely irrelevant to what we're looking for. And it doesn't actually bring science any further. And yet we're holding on to that. That to me is something where I go, what is that all about? It would be so easy to change that. Or even the way that we have our slaughterhouses set up. There are so many ways we could do this in a much honoring way. And we know how to, and yet it's not being implemented. Those are the kinds of things where I get that if people were willing to really be more aware about everything that is going on around them, they would make different choices and they would demand that certain things are changing or be done in a different way. And this goes beyond all of that. Of course, there's so many things that could be changed in the world, how we treat each other, for one. And, and that too, I think if we were willing to really be more aware of everything at all times, I don't know that we could hold on to doing these things to each other with ease. I'm not sure how that would work if we were all functioning from awareness. And I have no idea, because maybe we would still do them, because I haven't been there. I haven't lived in a world like this. So I'm not sure what that will look like.
So how do you see that the animals could be, or do you see that the animals could be like an an entry point for people to start getting this more energetic communication?
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of people that come to my class that think they absolutely know nothing about animal communication. And yet, when they're in the class and I point out to them that they have been communicating with energy in their whole lives, then they go, oh, you are correct. And it actually does open the door. And I can say this to you right now, and you don't have to ever come to class. Just recognize where you are already communicating energetically, because you all are. There isn't a single one that doesn't do it, because we can't actually even cut that off. It's part of who we are, and our bodies are. Our bodies are energetically communicating all the time. So you can't actually really stop that. You just try so hard to go into this verbal thing because that's what you learned. But you learn to ignore these other things because, again, oftentimes for me, when you're a little kid and you're being so super psychic and you know everything that's going on around you, how many parents actually enjoy that? And no, they don't. And they will say, no, honey, no, that's not true. No. That's not how it is. No. We would hear that more often than not. Like, no, you got that wrong. No, you didn't. You got that right on the spot. But your parents didn't want to admit that, or nobody wanted to hear about it, or it's a secret. And you were just standing there blurting it out. And they were like, oh, how did she know that? Did you tell her? So basically, no, you just knew that. And so it's something you all have. It's just been basically beaten out of you for the most part. So now it's time to just unlock that again and be like, oh, I'll have more of that now. Thank you very much.
I love that. I get that if we were willing to actually step into those energetic capacities and claim that energy is our first language, the world would start changing. And it is already changing because people are stepping into that more and more. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. And now I really miss my horse.
Well, hopefully we get to travel again at some point.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Suzy.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation a lot. Thank you, Katarina.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, Feeding the Wolf of Possibilities. I hope you have more space in your world now. If you would like to listen to earlier episodes, share with other people, or subscribe, please go to Spotify, iTunes, or visit KatarinaWallentin.com/wolf.